So you're going to hear Grandma Iole Martinat talking about her early married life in her, like she was 18 when she got married. So this is all happening around then, when she was 18 or 19. And I'll just show you pictures of the family. There's Grandma Iole, and here's my mom, Yolanda Lonnie, Banker Coates. This is when we lived in Westwood when I was going to college. And here is Grandma Iole talking.
And so he tried out, but he failed. And the reason he failed is that Bob never...
Oh, hold on just a second. He was trying to get into...
Bob never got dizzy. They spun him around. One of the tests was to see if you got dizzy. And they spun him around for hours, but he never got dizzy. And I guess that was not a good sign for a pilot. He had to know when to get dizzy, and he never got dizzy. No matter, you could spin him around forever. Wow. And he never got dizzy. So which, thank God, I'm glad he failed. Yeah, because those pilots over there were very vulnerable, because against the Nazi, they had a pretty good Air Force. Yeah. So anyhow, so here in these States, of course, there were no pilots at all. So they started these little schools to teach the men how to fly. And I forgot to mention that the reason Bob came to California was that he could learn to fly. He earned his own money, because I guess his parents wouldn't pay for the money because they didn't want him to fly. They were worried about him, and so that's why he worked at nights at Douglas, and then learned how to fly in the daytime. Oh my God! So he had quite a head start on people that, So anyhow, so he applied to, I think, one school it had to be like, in World War II, you could not have any airplanes. You had to, if you owned an airplane, you had to have it 200 miles inland. You couldn't be on the coast at all. So you had to have it 200 miles. Oh, we're not 200 miles inland, though. I don't think so. Well, not here. But he went up north, in the Mono County area. Yeah. And, well, he didn't like that too good. So he checked it in at Blythe, California, and he passed the test and got a job there teaching men how to fly, cadets in Blythe. Was the job with the Army, or was it? Well, it was, you were paid by the Army. You were not in the Army, but you wore an Army uniform, and you were an instructor. And so then we had, in the meantime, we had bought a house in Venice, his house, and we decided to sell that because it was very difficult to rent that house and be in Blythe at the same time. I wish we had it now, but anyhow. Were you living in Blythe? Yeah. So then part of the time I stayed with my mom and dad, and part of the time. And by then, our little Lonnie, Yolanda, we call her Lonnie for short, had come on the scene, which would be Annie's mom. And so now there were three of us. Well, she was born in 42, though, so Pearl Harbor happened first. Is that no, after. No. Mom was born in 42. Yeah, well, she was born in June. Yeah, and Pearl Harbor was the 41. Yeah. So Pearl Harbor came first. Yeah, that's it. That must
must have been like, you were pregnant.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know, that was
that's
kind of a hard time, I think.
Yeah. So, so then we went to Blythe, and, oh God, it was a godforsaken town, but it was called the Morton Air Academy.
You went there with Mom?
Well, yeah, part of the time, but because at the time there were no air conditioners at that time. There were just what we call swamp coolers, which was not a very good way to cool your house. Not very, but of course it was better than nothing, but we didn't have that. And we rented a place. Wasn't too great, but it was a place. And so it was kind of cute because Bob wore the same kind of uniform as the cadets wore, and we'd go walking down the street, her and I. She was about, well, how old was she? About 1, 2.
Were you walking?
Yeah, a little bit. And every cadet she saw, she'd say, "Daddy!" Because he wore that uniform. Well, anyhow,
probably the other guys.
so he had like, he had 5 cadets per class. And so he taught the basics. And I think it was I can't remember the time.
In a way, Grandpa was a teacher.
Oh yeah, he was. He had that natural ability like you have to be able to explain, not only do it, but to explain it to the people. And so you'd be like, let's see, one weekend he'd have to work, and then the next weekend he'd get like about 4 days off. So those 4 days off, we'd run back to L.A. and of course there wasn't any freeway, and it was really, we were asleep. I don't know how to this day. I know I must have fallen asleep several times driving because we'd be so sleepy. But anyhow, we made that. And then
you changed positions in the car, like when you were hitting without stopping.
We'd change from driver without. And what was difficult about the trip, because it was a two-lane road all the way to Blythe, and was the convoys, because there was a great big Army base just before you got to Blythe, and it was a Army where they taught the soldiers. They were preparing them for the attack in Africa, and the terrain was a lot like Africa, where they were going to attack. Hot, and they'd be in these tanks. It would be like about 120 in the tanks, and they lost many men. Just in the training, yeah. We'd walk. Sometimes we'd walk into the little town of Blythe, and of course there was only one mortuary, and there would be like 6 or 7 caskets lined outside on the sidewalk because there wasn't any room. Inside, so some of that part was kind of very depressing. And so I think we stayed there about a year and a half, and then it was
we forgot one thing. It's kind of interesting how you heard on the radio about Pearl Harbor. So,
okay.
Did you miss that?
When the first time we heard that President Roosevelt announced that we were at war with Japan. Are there any Japanese in your class?
No.
We were every Sunday from Santa Monica. We came to Monterey Park to visit my mom and dad. And my father had a birthday game
lined up
had made a butcher game, and every Sunday we'd go for dinner, lunch, and then the company would come over, and my mom's and dad's company. And then the men would play bocce, the women would talk. And Bob and I always remember, Bob and I had our blankets spread out on the grass, and we were listening to the radio and
Having lunch?
no, we had lunch inside with my mom and dad. And then we heard President Roosevelt had declared war on Japan because the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. So just right, I don't know the time involved, but it was just real quick like. We had immediately declared war on Japan.
I think this Hudson Valley Hospital is where Grandma Iole Martinat Banker was born, in Peekskill, although her parents were living in Croton on the Hudson at the house of somebody in a consulate or something working for him. But I think she was born here in Peekskill at the Hudson Valley Hospital. Okay, continuing.
That's when we decided, that's when Bob, got a job at Blythe and all that. After, right.
And he must have been kind of scared, I guess.
Oh, yeah, just not having a newspaper or television and just only relied on the radio for what news we got. And so that's when I forgot to mention that once in a while, since we only had one car, I would take Bob to work in Santa Monica at the Douglas Aircraft Company. And they had the whole top of the Douglas plant was like a city. They had like houses and clothes on the clothesline in case we were attacked. They couldn't identify that quite as well because from the air it looked more like like the picturesque. And I do remember one night when we were in Santa Monica, there was this really, really big noise, like a gun had gone off, and we never were quite clear, but I think now they have proven that the Japanese got as close to bombing or with a submarine Santa Barbara, and I believe, I don't think it hit anything, but or if it did, they didn't tell us.
Wow.
And we did hear that, but we did hear the noise.
Wasn't it like they had blackouts or something, so there was no light?
There was all blacked out. And you drove with your low lights on everywhere.
You couldn't see
anything. And couldn't see anything much. And you always had to have your curtains pulled clear down, pretty much like England did, I think. Always had to have your curtains, not one peep of light was supposed to show. Oh, not during the daytime, just at night.
Yeah.
And so it was a very uncertain part of my life because, you never know whether your husband has to be sent to war and where he would be. And so he put a lot of his students who were very good, and they passed them, and they would have graduation after, I forget how long the course was, but it wasn't too long.
Yeah.
And these guys were sent out, So, well, if you've ever taken flying lessons, you know how much practice you need for driving. Well, you just multiply that by 100, and you think of all the hours that you But of course the airplanes at that time were slower, but still they were.
Oh, yeah.
and so then they gave Bob a choice. They could see that there was now, because these little schools were all over the United States, so they were getting like a surplus. Not a surplus, but they had enough people for the Air Corps.